In any event, society as such has done nothing to produce the extra dollar. Society has simply existed, and the extra value is simply one of the expression of that existence. This increment, then, is just as truly unearned by society as by the individual, and since in the very nature of things it cannot be separated from the original value, the title to it must be of necessity with the title to the rest. And in justification of this unearned increment, it must be remembered that the shifting of social conditions quite as often takes away a dollar from the value. The thing produced today to meet a $10 value may be worth only $9 tomorrow without the slightest change in the article itself. A dollar of value has vanished. We may say that society has taken it away in just the same sense that we say that society added the other dollar. The individual cannot ask for reimbursement from society for the dollar that goes, nor can he be asked by society for reimbursement for the dollar that comes. Fluctuation and speculation. It is with these dollars of value that go and come, whence and whither, like the wind no man knoweth, that the game of speculation is played. And the trick is to play it so that when the dollar comes it shall be to my pocket, and when it goes that shall be from yours. The speculator produces nothing. He adds nothing to the aggregate of values. He gives nothing in return for his gain. Of the free outpourings of society in the form of increased values, showered gratis upon the world's producers, like the storied manna of the wilderness, he schemes to divert all to his own storehouse. And of the values that are absorbed back by society in the reversal of the same natural process, he schemes to have all diverted from the supply of his fellows. His economic relation to the world is very like that of the beggar by the wayside with the upturned cup to catch the pennies of the kind-hearted passers-by. Only he is a prince of beggars, crowding more deserving objects of society's largesse out of the way and grabbing all for himself. The claim that the speculator helps to steady prices and thus performs a public service that entitles him in honesty to his reward may be questioned even as a matter of fact. Are not prices more stable in those realms of commerce least affected by speculative dealings? But granting that the speculator does steady prices indirectly or might do so under favorable conditions, to justify him for that reason is like exonerating the embezzler and the burglar on the ground that they render an equivalent to society in furnishing entertainment to the readers of the newspapers that report their crimes. All this is speculation at its best, but the game is not always at its best. Played in the realms of high finance, it ceases to be the simple taking advantage of the natural rise and fall of values, which constitute for the most part a narrow range of fluctuation. Such operations are too small for these masters of the money markets and staple markets of the world. Their game does not wait for natural changes of value, it forces the change. By artificial means they beat values down till they buy, and then force values up till they sell. By the spreading of false rumors, the needless passing of dividends, the deliberate injury of business enterprises, the manipulation of banking privileges, the precipitation of money panics, and even by making the government itself, state and national, party to their schemes, by all means, fair or foul, legal or criminal, as best suits their need, they ensure the depreciation of the properties they seek to acquire, and then by an equally scrupulous reversal of policy, they turn the tide and end a campaign of inflation by uploading upon the innocent public. The process is then repeated ad infinitum. This manipulation and juggling of values does not merit the quasi-respectable name of speculation. It is not even square gambling. It is another case of marked cards and loaded dice. It is just as honest as bank wrecking and highway robbery. Bounties of nature. This precept that honesty in trade requires the exchange of equivalents is merely the application to that department of the world's business of the fundamental principles that every man has a right to what he produces, and that of all the fruits of labor no man has a right to what he does not produce. It is here that these principles are most easily applied, since they fit with little strain into the scheme of society as at present organized. But the need is far greater that the application be made to those branches of production that involve more directly the relations of labor and capital, of employer and employee, of interest and wages. We have claimed these principles as axiomatic, and doubt not that they will be so accepted. They are trite truths, recognized by every man who takes the trouble to think below the surface of things, and yet they will seem to most people as purely academic and utterly worthless so far as concerns their adaptability to present-day conditions in the industrial world, either as a guide for individual conduct or as a solution for our great social problems. In the complexity of modern industrial organization, who is to say just what or how much each man produces? It is only here and there in this 20th century that any man labors by himself, and even then, 9 times in 10, the conditions are such that the product is not all his own. When only 2 men work together as employer and employee, or as overseer and laborer, or even as fellow servants, how is it possible to determine just where one man's product leaves off and the other's begins? And how vast the difficulty where scores or hundreds or thousands of men labor together to one end, and then the innumerable complications that enter into the problem, from the unthinking, brute-like labor of one man or group of men accompanied by the planning, supervising, engineering labor of others, from the working of one man or body of men upon raw materials furnished by and belonging to another, or with tools or machines belonging to another. Of the whole output of the factory, what part is produced by the combined body of laborers, what part by superintendents, what part by mastermind of the proprietor, and what part by the capital invested, let alone the division of the product to find the righteous portion of each individual worker? Are not these the same old problems that men have been fighting over ever since the beginning of our present industrial system? And where then is there the least possibility of a solution by means of these theoretical axioms of honesty? It must be admitted that at first sight the case looks hopeless, and yet it is far from hopeless, for on closer examination it will be found, not only that these principles are practicable in the industrial world, but also that they are automatic in their action when combined in their application with the third fundamental principle of honesty, which has already been stated, that all men have equal rights in the bounties of nature. This, too, we shall claim to be self-evident and axiomatic, except possibly to the comparatively few who profit under present conditions by appropriating to themselves that which nature furnishes on equal terms for all, and which belongs in consequence jointly and equally to all nature's children. All men have equal rights in air and sunshine and water and land and the great forces of the earth, in so far as these are nature's gifts. It is true that under certain conditions any one of these elements may become in a degree the product of labor, as when air is forced into a diving bell, or water is piped into a building, or land is cleared or drained, and then the property rights of production have to be reckoned with. But in their natural state, as they come from the hand of the Creator, all these things are the free gift of the Almighty to the human race, and in the very nature of things, all right to them is only a right in common. Equal rights in land. To the political economist, all these things are summed up in the one term land, and so our third principle of honesty may as well resolve itself into the maxim that all men have equal rights in land. This does not mean that one man may rightly step in and reap where another has sown. The sowing makes its own right. It does not mean that one man may rightly crowd another out of his living place or out of his working place on the land. Equitable tenure and use involve rights that must be respected, but it does not mean that every man has a right equally with every other man to a living place and a working place on the face of the earth, and that it is not charity or philanthropy or some strained ideal of justice to be doled out with the condescension by the rich to the poor that makes the strongest appeal for the recognition and establishment of this right in human society, but honesty itself, plain honesty between man and man. Honesty demands that no man shall take from nature's common store more than his equal share, and that no man shall be deprived of his equal share, and it is here that honesty comes into conflict with the present social system. No man can live without land, and no man can work without land. Land is the prime requisite of life and of production. All wealth comes from land through human labor. Every man must have land, either of his own right, and on his own terms, or through the sufferance of others, and on such terms as they may impose. And it is the curse of the present social system that all the land within the scope and influence of society is owned and controlled by comparatively few of society's members, and none others may labor or live except as they make terms with these few. This is a great wrong, although as yet little realized. So hardened have we become to a condition that partakes of the very essence of human slavery. Indeed, it is worse than slavery in that while placing the shackles of helpless dependence upon great masses of humanity, it still deceives them with the idea that they are not enslaved. We boast that we are a nation of free men, and yet no man without untrammeled access to land can be free. His living, his opportunity to produce, his very life itself are in the hands of those to whom he must pay perpetual tribute or cease to exist. Land enough for all. And the injustice is the more marked and the more unbearable to those who realize it, in that it has no excuse whatever in the natural condition of things. There is land enough for all, vastly more than enough. The human race cannot begin to occupy the face of the earth. Every man, woman, and child in the world could stand together on an area, a small fraction, over 22 square miles, allowing 3 feet each way for each person. The entire population of the globe, sunk in Lake Michigan, would raise the water level only 1/8 of an inch. Our own continent could give every soul of humanity a self-supporting home on the land with 10 acres to every family, and the British Isles could do the same thing by every family within their borders. Even the most densely populated areas of our civilization contain thousands of acres of unused land of the best quality, idle because held out of use by the dog-in-the-manger policy of the landowners, who neither occupy it themselves nor allow anyone else to do so, no matter how great the need, until they have succeeded in exacting their monopoly price. The land situation has its exact counterpart in the streetcar, where there is ample room for all, and yet one passenger spreads himself and his luggage over 6 seats while others are compelled to stand. All have boarded the car on the same terms, and all have equal rights to seats. The man who gets on first is not entitled for that reason to take possession of the whole car and compel aftercomers to pay him for the privilege of sitting. So long as there are more seats than passengers, they may use more room than he really needs. Equally with the rest, but the instant there are others seeking accommodations, he must begin to contract himself and his belongings, and as the demand increases, he must occupy less and less space until at last he is confined to his own seating necessities. Like the passengers on the car, we have all come aboard the earth for the journey of life on the same terms. We have paid the same fare and are entitled to the same accommodations. Those who come first have no right to monopolize the seats, the land, and make the rest pay tribute for that which in the very nature of things goes free with the ticket. As more people come aboard, those already here must shove along a little to accommodate the new arrivals. Surely no one must be compelled to stand or to hang to a strap while there are seats enough and to spare. Equal rights to society. Of course, the landless man may betake himself to the frontier or the wilderness and be landless no more, provided there is still a region of this kind unappropriated and inhabitable. That is what other pioneers of other days have done, and it is from them that the titles of our present landowners have been handed down. But all men have equal rights to the blessings of society, as well as equal rights to land, and that means that all men have equal rights to land within the bounds of society. There is certainly no equality where one man has all the land he needs in the midst of the advantages of the highest civilization, while another has to seek his beyond the reach of everything that makes life worth living, save the bare land itself. Nor is this last resort of pioneering available to very many of the men who need land most. The cost in time and energy and endurance, and withal in money, of transferring one's self and one's family and belongings to a far-off country is prohibitive to the majority. That some men in the past did, and that some men in the present do, pay this exorbitant price for land and liberty does not make it any the less an outrage that any man should have to resort to such heroic means to secure for himself what the Almighty has placed freely within the reach of all. If all men had equal privileges in the land, as all have equal rights, if each man owned and controlled what he could use and no more, land occupancy would keep close to the confines of civilization, and the two would go hand in hand and step by step, spreading gradually from common centers with the growth of population. And that is the condition that will prevail when humanity comes into its own in a righteous land system. Every man with his equal right in the land will have equal opportunity of access to the land and equal opportunity of production, and common honesty among men will be satisfied with nothing less.